Hello lovely people, it's been a while, but I'm here finally to wrap up my August reading.
Sophie Vlogs.
A tiny bit of housekeeping before we dive into the video. It has been a little while, it's only been a few weeks for you, but it's been over a month since I recorded and I feel very rusty. Please don't ask me what my hair is doing. We're calling this my 80s workout video look. The move went well, it took a long time, and I damaged my knee. So I have been recovering a little bit, also still working out all of this filming. It's definitely a bit gloomier. I'm gonna work on that. So essentially, this is just my little pre-ramble of saying that it's lovely to be back, but also things are still slightly in progress. Hopefully, as the weeks pass, my lighting will get better. I'm hoping to buy a new camera soon so that my audio will get better, all of these things and more. But without further ado, it's time for me to wrap up these books before I forget how I feel about them. So in August, I took part in 2 readathons. I took part in All the World's Page readathon, which is prompts inspired by Shakespeare plays, and I took part in Draconathon, which is prompts either to do with dragon books or geographical prompts. I had a really fun time taking part in both. I'm not going to list out which prompts these books relate to, I'm just going to dive into it and start talking. The first book I want to talk about is Firekeepers Daughter by Angeline Boulley. This is set on an Ojibwe reservation. We follow Dornis. She is a teenager in school. She witnesses the murder of her best friend, and she ends up helping the FBI in their investigations into a string of deaths that have been drug related. I really, really liked this book. It kind of delivered what I wanted, which was a mystery kind of thriller thing that I was interested in finding out the solution to, but also a real look at Dornis, her culture, her relationship with her culture, that kind of thing. So this is it's interesting because I really liked Dornis as a character, but she is definitely a character who kind of stays the same throughout this book. The narrative of this book is not Dornis as a character going on a journey and changing as a person. She remains fundamentally the same person throughout this. It's more of a slow-paced mystery to do with what is happening to these people. And again, those are things which I think some could bother some people. So some people might find this very slow, some people might not enjoy the fact that Dornis kind of remains the same, but I liked those things because I enjoyed the journey I went on with this. It does take a while for the sort of investigation of the drug aspect to kind of come into gear and then develop. What I really loved about this essentially is I loved being immersed in Dornis because Dornis is a person who cares so deeply about her community that she also feels in some ways conflicted of, because her dad was Ojibwe but her mum wasn't, and her dad is passed, so she has a complex relationship with this community that she feels very tied to, but that does not always necessarily reciprocate those feelings in all of the ways, or rather one of the journeys that she goes on through this is sort of reaffirming that connection to these people, and these people who actually, when it comes down to it, come through for her. This does look at a lot of very serious topics that really do affect Native communities, so as such there are definitely some content warnings for this. To do with, not just to do with the aspect that is the way that these drugs are affecting the community, but sexual assault. There are a lot of these topics which are very real lived experiences that are explored in here. I personally felt like one thing that runs throughout this is Dornis, although she is working with the FBI to solve the question of where are these drugs coming from, everything she does is actually coming back to the community. She frequently is reminding these FBI agents that she's working with that these are real people who are at the heart of this. If there are incidences where kids take drugs and then they report things are those kids okay? Solving the crime does not necessarily help heal the community. And I just felt like that was something that I really appreciated about Dornis's character. She is always acting to try and look after the people that she loves and to keep her community safe. So this is one of those books where I can understand that it won't be for everyone in regards to pacing and character development and that kind of thing. I was really gripped. I thought it handled these issues that it was looking at in a nuanced way that I really appreciated, and I'm definitely going to be interested to see what this author does next. Next up was a book that has been doing the rounds lately. This is She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker-Chan. This was one of my most anticipated books of the year. This is essentially like a reimagining of the founding of the Ming Dynasty in China. So we follow Zhu, who, when she is a child, her brother is foretold to have great glory, and she herself is foretold to have nothingness. But what actually happens is her brother dies, and so she takes on the mantle of him and his destiny, and she goes forth into the world. And that was a really interesting aspect of this, is the way that Zhu is always, she feels like she has to absolutely become this other person. If, like, the universe becomes aware that she is not who she claims to be, then she'll lose everything. And so then that meant that there was this really interesting look at sort of like greatness and how Zhu feels like she has to behave in order to achieve greatness, which is something that is then challenged as the book goes on. She ends up at times having to embrace aspects of herself that are not things that her brother would have considered or had access to, or entertained thought processes of, and that kind of thing. And then I really feel like she goes on a journey throughout this, which is sort of like understanding that while she feels like she has to wholly inhabit this place of being this person in order to achieve greatness, actually some of her greatest strengths come from things that person never would have had access to. So that was a really interesting journey. There's also another perspective in this, which is Ouyang, who is a eunuch who is in the army of essentially the opposite side of the conflict to Zhu. Zhu, when she first sees him, kind of identifies with him in some ways. In they have this status as sort of other that is gendered in some ways, and there is an interesting push and pull between the two of them that runs throughout this that I did enjoy. Ouyang's perspective is interesting because he is present within the Mongol court. He has his own personal sort of vendetta that he has been building towards for years. So this is one of those that kind of has a lot of like political intrigue and machinations, which I really enjoyed. It has battles and clashes, and also a lot of very like internal struggles, and I really enjoyed sort of the combination of this like wider epic scale conflict that is very much to do with like who controls this country, who has access to power and military strategy and all this kind of thing, and then with like much more internal conflicts. This was also very much the perfect book to read while we were moving house, because it was quite a lot and a little bit stressful, and so this became something that I could like dip in and out of during like quieter moments, and so I think that did add to my enjoyment of reading it, because it was kind of everything I needed at the time. So I did really, really enjoy this one. It's definitely one I would recommend. Completely forgot to mention the entire like sapphic aspect of this, which I also really enjoyed. Just a book that, again, I would be really interested to see what Shelley Parker-Chan does next. I think there is another book in this world coming out. Don't hold me to that, but I'm pretty sure. Another book that I read for Draconathon was The Dark Archive by Genevieve Cogman. This is maybe the 8th book of the Invisible Library series. Don't hold me to that number, can't remember how many there have been. Essentially, the Invisible Library series is a series that takes place in this world where you have the library, which is like an interdimensional place, and librarians travel across different dimensions. They bring back rare books to the library, and it kind of creates like a point of stability. Where we are at in the series by now, things are a lot more complex. There's a lot of politics at play between different factions, because there are fae who are creatures of chaos, there are dragons who are creatures of order, and essentially the book before this one in the series I really enjoyed. It was riffing off of kind of like James Bond at times, which was just something that I enjoyed, but also like I just had a really fun time with it. I don't know if it was because of reading it during a bit of a stressful moving time, or if just this book wasn't quite as strong to me, but I didn't enjoy this one as much. And it's not that I didn't have a fun time. I didn't think it was a bad book. This book takes place in the world that Irene is like stationed in, so like different librarians get stationed in different places. And I think one of my favourite things about the series is that different books, usually they go to different worlds, and I always really enjoy the aspect that is getting to know your different world. Like, what historical time period are we riffing off of? What sort of genres are we playing with? And again, maybe it's also the genres we're playing with here and not super the genres that I'm interested in, because we are stationed in a world that I feel like I kind of already know. There wasn't so much of that like delightful exploration aspect to it. Equally, a lot of this is taken up with an old foe who may or may not be making a reappearance, which was necessary plot-wise, but I didn't find the most thrilling story-wise. So I think for me, I enjoyed this as I always enjoy this series. It's a series that I know that I can just keep on reading and I will keep on having a fun time. It didn't draw me in as much, and it was sort of like a 3 out of 5 stars for me as opposed to other ones. It's a series that I would still heartily recommend. It's just some of the books in it hit you more than others. Another one that I also had hoped I would enjoy more than I kind of did was A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan, which is the first book in the Lady Trent series. This is a series that kind of combines like Regency era style sort of writing with dragons. Lady Trent is like this world's like preeminent dragon scholar. She is writing this from an older age, looking back and describing to you how she became to be the figure that she now is. I think one thing for me is just that there just weren't as many dragons in this as I had expected, and that's probably something which, as the series goes on, more dragons will become apparent, because you're very much being introduced to this world and the different countries, like the politics. You spend time with her as a younger child where this fascination with dragons develops, and then she is courting, she's trying to find a husband, she gets married, they end up going on this expedition where they try and find dragons, and it was all absolutely fine. It was quite slow-paced because of this narrative style, where we have quite a formal narrative, and because it is like natural history, it's very much like a scientific expedition, and they are journeying to new places, trying to find the dragons, that kind of thing, getting embroiled in things that is not in any way dragon-related. So this was one that I thought was absolutely fine, and I did enjoy this new take on doing dragons. That was really fun, and there's a lot of things that I in theory like about this. At the same time, I did find it quite slow, and at times I was a little bit bored, which again, I don't mean to keep harping on about it, but it could have been to do with the fact that I was moving and really stressed. Let me tell you that one more time. But essentially, I think something faster paced would have potentially worked better for me, especially because like this one was really good, but it was also a bit slow paced. This one also takes its time, and I think maybe by the time I got to this, I wanted something a lot more oomphy than what this was. So potentially a series I will still continue. I would love to hear from you if you have read more of the series. I do think I would continue to like it. I just think maybe it wasn't the best thing to pick up at that time in my reading and moving journey. Those were all the books I set myself to read for the readathons. I also want to just talk about 2 more books. The first of these is If We Were Villains by ML Rio. All the World's a Page seemed like the perfect time to pick this up because all of those prompts are about Shakespeare, and this book is so suffused with Shakespeare. When this starts, Oliver has just been released from prison for a crime that he may or may not have committed. The detective who had put him behind bars has retired, and he's like, look mate, I'm old. Will you just tell me the truth? So Oliver takes him back to this academy where he went to school and sort of walks him through what happened 10 years ago. So it's this exclusive, academy is probably not the right word, but this is an exclusive school of the arts, and Oliver was part of the drama group. And it's extremely exclusive, it's extremely cutthroat, they cull people every year. So essentially there is this group of them who are all the drama students, they're finally in their final year, each term ends with a performance. And the casting this year goes against the grain of what it previously has. So people are cast in roles that they ordinarily would not be cast in based on the type that they usually embody. And this change in casting has this ripple effect across all of their relationships. And so things start to take a turn for the dark. And you know that they're going to culminate in someone dying. because that is why he is behind bars, but you don't know who or how, and so you just follow it as it happens. One thing I loved about this is I absolutely loved the performances. The first performance you get is them performing Macbeth outside, and they turn up and they don't know who is cast in each position. And the descriptions of how it was staged, I could see it. I could see it vividly, and I wanted to see it. I wanted to see it performed. Again, it happens later. They do Romeo and Juliet, and every time she was writing about their performances, I could see so clearly, like the imagery was so evocative, and I just thought it was such interesting staging, and I wanted to see the performances, even take the murder mystery out of it. I was like, I want to see these people perform Shakespeare. So I loved that aspect of it, absolutely. I've not read a lot of dark academia before, so that was something that I enjoyed kind of exploring. I don't know if this would be classed as dark academia, like they're out of school, they're studying some things, but it's very much this like pretentious students and their actions spiral into like chaos and betrayal, which I did really enjoy like immersing myself into. I think one thing that I will say about this is I found the broader plot quite predictable. Like, I very much had a sense of who was going to be the person who died. I think it's quite clear. I also think as a result of how characters are focused on and written, it's also pretty clear who did it. Or who your potential people who could have done it are. I will say for me, I didn't mind because what I was interested in this was the characters and the atmosphere. So it was delivering for me on those aspects. So then I didn't mind so much that it felt plot-wise quite predictable. But I can really see that that will bother some people because if I think it's really easy to predict who's done it. And then you spend a lot of time sitting with that knowledge. So if you're not really enjoying the characters and the atmosphere, you're just going to be very impatient. I also think the exclusivity of the school is an interesting aspect because it allows for the characters to have quite a lot of independence in their actions because they're left to do a lot of independently working on their parts and that kind of thing, while also this kind of stifling sense of enclosure because they all live in this one building that is like kind of removed from the rest of the campus, so they're like together but also very isolated, and I think that is sort of this perfect like setting that you need in order for these tensions to build up and bubble, because you're just far enough away from anyone being able to intervene that things are allowed to spiral out of control to the extent that they do. And also because they're constantly doing performances, all of their like feuds and the emotions that are rising to the surface get played out in a very public way, because a lot of the casting is exacerbating the feelings that are already present. So you have this like very, very private stuff that is happening between them in the house, but then is played out in front of the entire school in their performances, which is, again, an interesting aspect to it. I will say, character-wise, I did wish that some characters were taken further than they were. Like, there's a character who's very much typecast as a vixen, and I feel like at times the plot was sort of drawing attention to, like, her insecurities, that that's all she is, but it didn't really let her be more than that. And there were other characters who, although they are part of the group, were easy to discount as potential murderers because they're just not present enough in the text. This is a very male-focused text. Like, it's all of the dudes get a lot of time, and like the girls are sort of like to the side a bit. I think I also expected there to be like a secondary reveal, because you spend so much time with these characters and everything, you know what's going to happen, but then equally I was expecting there to be an additional reveal of something, and that kind of never really came. So I also have some feelings about the ending, but I can't talk about them right now because I don't want to spoil this, but if you've read this and you'd like to discuss sort of like aspects of the ending, that kind of thing, please do leave a comment down below. I would really be interested in having those discussions. Essentially, I had quite a lot to say on this. I really enjoyed it. There are just aspects of it that have left me slightly with more things to run through and to mull over, I think. But on the whole, this is definitely one that I found incredibly immersive, and it's definitely one that I can see myself recommending to people going forward. Finally, I just also wanted to talk about Reputation by Lex Croucher, which I picked up because of the moving, and I was like, God, I just need something fun. and this really gave it to me. This is billed as kind of like Mean Girls meets Bridgerton, and I understand both of those comparative points. Essentially, we follow Georgiana, who is, she's gone to stay with her aunt and uncle, and she thinks it's going to be incredibly boring, and then she bumps into this sort of like clique, and she becomes embroiled with them. There's a lot of like Regency teens like drinking, being a bit mean to each other, like in that way that does feel very like classic like teen movies from my sort of teen years kind of thing. There is also like a romance angle that develops. Essentially, I'm not necessarily sure I have the most to say about this book. I found it really fun. It was paced in a way that really worked for me because I needed something that was kind of fast-paced, that was fun, that was going to take me like forward. I had a fun time like with this combination of like Regency manners, society, plot beats that you would expect from a Regency novel, with like very much like some modern aspects of like the type of plot that is developing. Again, I don't have the most to say about it. I just had a fun time, and I just thought I would mention it right at the end. Those are all the books I wanted to talk about. I hope this was okay. It's been a while. I feel all thrown. But I hope you had a lovely August. I hope your September is going well. I have a whole backlog of videos to film so that will hopefully be coming soon. But until that point, I hope you're having a very lovely day. I will see you next time for something different.